Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of the 1973 podcast. I'm very happy and honored to have one of the Hanson brothers, Dave Hanson, with us on the show. And Dave, before we're done, we're going to answer two questions. We're going to answer, what did Jeff get hit with? Was it a tire iron? Was it keychain? Was it car keys to the camper? And also defending the honor of Johnstown, if you guys called the pizza man or if you called the massage parlor. So we're going to get that out of the way with during the course of this episode. So
look forward to
it. So we
Sounds
always
good. All right, Andy, let's go.
We always start by asking how everybody got started on their hockey journey, and we wanted to ask you that as a kid growing up. Was hockey prevalent in your, day to day?
Well, I grew up in Minnesota, so the one thing we got up there is a lot of lakes, a lot of winters, and a lot of mosquitoes. So if you're not swimming, skating, you're swatting mosquitoes. So I did a lot of skating, a lot of swimming, a lot of swatting mosquitoes. But hockey was a big part of my life. The winters were long, so we played a lot of hockey, did a lot of skating, started out on the local playgrounds where the old geezer that ran the playground would be out there flooding the big fields and plowing it for us to go out and skate. And everybody picked up a hockey stick and played shinny hockey all day long and well into the night. So that was our winters. And, but at the same time, unlike kids today, we didn't focus on one sport. We played 3-4 sports growing up. So I was football and baseball and even did a little bit of track. But it was when I got out of high school that I actually thought I was going to go play football, college football, and had a fellow you might have heard of by the name of Herb Brooks knock on my door and said, "Hey, kid, how'd you like to be a Minnesota Gopher?" So that made my mind up real quick.
So talk about your journey into Minnesota and how that all came about.
Well, I made a decision to go to the University of Minnesota right out of high school, and was not good enough to play on the varsity team. Got stuck on a JV team, started out there, and showed my immaturity where I didn't have the patience to recognize, or the maturity, I should say, to recognize that, hey, kid, you're not going to make it right away. You got to work hard to get to where you want to be. Because I was the big fish in a very small pond as far as my high school hockey. We weren't very good. The closest I ever got to playing in being in the Minnesota State tournament was watching it on TV. So I made a decision after a year or so at the U. Under Herbie's tutelage and his assistant coaches on the JV team to go play junior hockey for a junior team in St. Paul called the St. Paul Vulcans, and played for another great coach there by the name of Doug Woog, who went on to the University of Minnesota after Herbie left to have a great career at the university there as a coach. So played a couple of years of junior hockey there and got drafted by the Minnesota Fighting Saints as a WHA, as well as being recruited heavily by the New York Rangers, and decided to sign with the Saints and kick off a pro career when I was 20 years old.
So before we get too far into the pro career, I'm going to have these guys ask you a couple quick questions and we'll keep the timeline going. Derek, what do you got?
As far as the pro career, Dave, can you tell us about the story the first time, I believe you were in training camp at Niagara Falls, and Ron Dawkin takes you down to Johnstown for the first time as a 20-year-old. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I can. That's been, I've forgotten a lot of things, but I'll never forget that trip. Yeah, we after being in camp with the Fighting Saints in St. Paul, they sent a bunch of us off to their farm team, which was the Johnstown Jets, but training camp was up in Niagara Falls, Ontario. And, I got there, and I was one of few people at that point, because a lot of guys were still arriving to show up for camp. So our first practice literally was myself and the Hanson Brothers and a couple old veterans from the Johnstown Jets and the coach out there skating on this dungy old rink, staying in this dungy hotel called, I think it was called the Olympic Hotel or Olympia Hotel. In fact, our wake-up calls wasn't a phone call, calling the operator and having them call you on the phone. It was the maid who used to open up and slide open the window and open the door and come in with the vacuum cleaner and say, "Time to get out of here, boys." So when we broke camp though and headed to Johnstown, Pennsylvania, a place I'd never heard of, surprisingly, given the history of Johnstown with the historic Johnstown floods and everything. But I literally, we were driving in from Niagara Falls. I was driving with the goalie that was a veteran there, and we were coming literally down the hills of Pennsylvania into this valley on a late night where it was dark and it was kind of foggy, and then all of a sudden I see these bellowing flames shooting out of the pits of Johnstown. I thought I was going into the pits of hell. But, I got to be honest. I went in there and I got indoctrinated pretty quick from a veteran goaltender where we, before we even checked into the hotel, which was it wasn't even a step up from the Olympia in Niagara Falls. It was probably a step down. But he says, "Come on, kid." He says, "We're going to go hit the bars." And so we hit the bars of Johnstown, and then about 2 a.m. in the morning, I says, "Come on, it's been a long day. Let's go hit beds." And he says, "Well, before we do that, we got to take you to my favorite spot." He took me to Coney Island, the Coney Island restaurant. And I go walking in, and he yells at the waitress or the cook, I guess it was, behind the counter, and she yells back at, "Hey, Doc, how you doing? You want your usual?" And he says, "Yeah." And he says to me, "What do you have?" I says, "I have no idea. I've never, I'm a White Castle guy. I'm not a Coney Island hot dog guy." And he says, "Get Dave the usual too." And I look over, and there's this big old sweaty woman. She's got hot dogs lined up and down her arm, and she grabs a couple off her arm, slops them in a bun, slaps some chili sauce, throws some onions on it, brings them over. And I got to say, it was the best 2 a.m. meal I had in a long time. Finally got to the hotel about 3 a.m. About 3:30 a.m., I'm up barfing my guts out, peeling the paint off of the ceiling, and never been back to Coney Island since.
Ed, question for Dave.
Sure, Dave. Hey, what was it like to play for Herb Brooks? I mean, I know that these other two gentlemen have seen the movie Miracle, and what was it like to play for him?
Well, I would say, my experience with Herbie was short-lived, although we went on to become very good friends for a very long time. But everything you see in the movie, from what I knew of Herbie, was true. I came out of a small inner city school, big fish in a small pond. And all of a sudden, I'm at the university, and I got weighted vests on, and we're running up and down the football stadium stairs. And then we go from there, and we're out on the ice doing Herbies. Now, if you don't know what a Herbie is, in the movie, it's when let the wolves eat your legs, or whatever the saying was. But it was an exhausting skating drill without pucks, which is the most miserable time for any hockey player, when you don't have pucks and you're just skating. But I found him to be hard nosed, but willing to work with you, wonderful, cared about you. And again, in hindsight, almost 50 years later, if you talk about, are there things you might have done differently? That might have been one of them. I might have stuck it out with Herbie, just because actually that year they went on and won the national championship. The year I decided to leave, which who knows what it would have been, but anyhow, yeah, I go back to the movie. I mean, that was a very good portrayal Kurt Russell did of Herbie Brooks.
Now, if you I've read a lot of books about him too. If you go back, he really was a visionary, and there were some things that really stuck out to me. He took, I think it was Joe Micheletti, Reed Larson. They were centers coming up through their hockey career, and he said, "You know what? I'm going to take these good skating kids and make them puck moving defensemen." something that maybe not a lot of coaches would have seen. And yeah, he definitely had a keen eye for things like that.
Yeah, I know Joey and Reed Larson very well, and played against them, played with them. You know, we do this before training camps. We would get together and, you know, get in shape and stuff. And yeah, that's, you know, Herbie had a way of identifying talents in people, and you know, through his tough ways, you know, bring the best out of them. And you take someone like Reed. Yeah, Reed could skate like the wind, strong kid, and he had probably one of the hardest shots in hockey.
Yeah.
Put him on the blue line versus a wing or center where he can get that bugger off and get it to the net and just explode people's hockey skates, as well as, you know, blow them over goalies' shoulders. And yeah, he was, again, yeah, Herbie was exceptional. He was ahead of its time.
Yeah.
You know, pissed a lot of people off because of that. A lot of people, you know, they, especially back in Minnesota, you know, and for that matter, USA Hockey, you know, they weren't visionaries like Herbie was. And good for Herbie on holding his ground on a lot of things, and obviously led to, you know, some pretty spectacular outcomes.
Dave, before we get into the Slapshot talk, describe for people that don't know about the culture of hockey in the 70s, especially with the boys, the bus trips, how it was. You kind of touched on it with the Coney Island story, but a lot of the guys that we've talked to, Joe Watson, Andre Lacroix, they all have the same bond in training camp stories about how the culture has changed so much, and not so much for the better. It seems like the camaraderie was different. The time with the fellas was different than how it is now. Now it's not all about, it seems more corporate, and back then it seemed more blue collar. Do you agree?
Oh, I agree, absolutely. I mean, you look back then, you didn't have the internet. You didn't, you know, didn't have DVDs, DVRs, VHSs. You know, you rode on your trips, were on buses. You know, unless you were in the NHL, you know, where you flew. But even in the NHL, they often did a lot of bus trips. So training camps and in season was, you know, your time was spent a lot with your teammates. You know, and go back to Johnstown. I mean, I called it No Sunshine League. We never saw the sun. We were on a bus, sleeping, getting off the bus in the evening, going to the arena, play the hockey game, hop back on the bus, and drive to the next city. You know, and our time spent was playing cards in the back of the bus, or sitting in a bar having some beers, or at each other's house, that kind of thing. And that doesn't happen anymore. I mean, the kids, you know, the game has changed. The money, you know, money changes things. It's a big ticket item now for a lot of people. Players are a lot more conscious of their health and their training habits, and again, social media has ruined it. Has been a big contributor on ruining the camaraderie of guys and the things that people do. And you know, I often say, you know, thank goodness you didn't have social media back when we played, because
right,
you know, a lot of people be in jail or in trouble more often than they are now.
Yeah, I often say I don't think Mickey Mantle would have been quite the hero he was to people if there was social media when Mickey Mantle was playing.
I mean, you know, you read some of the books like Derek Sanderson's or Bobby Orr's, you know, or you talk to those guys. I mean, you know, one of the great things about when we retired from hockey and Slapshot took off, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but, you know, the great things that we used to have, we'd play these alumni games against, you know, and with the Boston Bruins, the Flyers, you know, the Capitals, and obviously it was a lot of fun being on the ice and playing with these guys. But the most of the fun was sitting in the locker room or going into the bars afterwards and talking and having a camaraderie of talking about the stuff that went on off the ice. And, you know, and the common thread was, thank goodness they didn't have video cameras, you know, media then.
So, Dave, when you played professional, did you see a big transition between the NHL and the World Hockey Association at the time, or was it pretty much the same?
I'd say it was pretty well the same. I mean, keep in mind, you know, it started out with a bunch of the guys jumping from the NHL to the WHA, you know, because they were throwing money around. The NHL was very tight string, tight purse. Bobby Hall, I mean, gosh, he was a superstar when he was with the Blackhawks, and they didn't want to come close to paying him what the WHA all got together and made a big pot of money to pay him, but what he was getting paid there. And I've talked about Bobby, and I became very good friends. And he told me that he would have stayed in Chicago if they even just gave him a 6-figure income versus what he ended up getting the NHL or WHA. But as far as the level of play, no, gosh, you had those teams in Edmonton, those teams in Minnesota, the teams in Winnipeg. I mean, Quebec. They could all have competed easily and in the NHL and been in the upper half of any division that they played in, and probably a couple of those teams could have won a Stanley Cup.
Derek,
Dave, is it true that the Minnesota Fighting Saints literally put the fighting in the Fighting Saints?
Oh.
And Andy, actually, this is Al Coates, your longtime Flyers announcer, said that it's true that you used to tape the hands and wear leather golf gloves before a big bout. Is that true?
First, let me tell you, don't believe a word Coach he says. He doesn't had an honest sentence come out of his mouth. That's the day he put on a pair of skates himself. So, and I say that lovingly. Coach and I were old teammates, and to this day are still good friends. Yeah, the Minnesota Fighting Saints, we had a coach by the name of Glenn Sonmore who had one eye. They had a glass eye, injured it when he was playing youth or junior hockey, and a tough bugger himself. And he really endorsed aggressive hockey and tough guy hockey. So, yeah, you had the Fighting Saints. You had guys on that team like Machine Gun Gallant, Jack Carlson, who was as tough as anybody and tougher than most, Billy Goldie Goldthorpe, John Arbor, Ron Busniak, Pat Western. I mean, the list goes on, and myself and others, Kurt Brackenberry. But then you had exceptional hockey players, like Mike Shaky Walton, and the list goes on, Davey Keon, Menzie, those guys. They were an exceptional hockey team, but very tough, very rugged, and it was the brand of hockey that sold. I mean, they used to at times in St. Paul outdrew the Minnesota North Stars, who was a staple in Minnesota, in the NHL. So it was a unique team, a lot of characters, a lot of you talk about stories. There's stories that even you don't tell on a podcast. But it was a fun time. It was a rebel league, and it was a lot of fun.
Yep.
Ed, question for Dave.
Well, Dave, since you kind of left the door open on there, what's the favorite road story that you can tell that doesn't affect statute of limitations or get anybody into trouble or anything like that?
You talking about on or off the ice? Or?
Oh, yeah, we'll stay with on the ice. We may drag it into off the ice a little bit, but.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I got a favorite story I often tell and it happened in WHA. I was playing, let me think. Birmingham. I was with the Birmingham Bulls, and we were playing against the Winnipeg Jets, and they had that Anders Hedberg and Paul Newman and Bobby Hall. They had that line that just, oh my gosh, it would easily rival any of the marquee lines in the National Hockey League over history. And Birmingham had a team like the Minnesota Fighting Saints, and ironically, Glenn Sonmore was the coach for us. So we had guys on that team: Bad News Bilodeau, Steve Durbo DeBano, Frank, Never Been Beaten, Dave Killer, Carl Hanson, and the list goes on. And we just could not. So we were playing Winnipeg in the first round, and I said to myself, I'm going to make a statement. It's going to be here in Winnipeg. We're starting off in Winnipeg. I'm going to make a statement. I'm going to let this team know that we're here to play, and we're here to win them. And so I made a commitment myself that my first opportunity against Bobby Hall, I was going to step into him, knock him on his ass, get the crowd oohing and get, everybody's ears and eyes perked open and say, hey, these guys are for real. They're here to play. So the opportunity came. Bobby came down the wing. I stepped up into him. Bobby Hall didn't break stride. I landed on my back, looked at the ceiling and saw the stars. Slithered off the ice with my tail between my legs and sat down and kind of recouped and regrouped and said, well, that ain't going to happen again. So in the next opportunity that I got a chance to hit him, I did. I hit him pretty hard. Probably got my elbows up a little too high. Bobby took exception. Him and I, surprisingly, he dropped his gloves and we're going at it in front of a full packed arena in Winnipeg. And all of a sudden, it was like you could have heard a pin drop. Time stopped. I looked at Bobby, and Bobby didn't look like Bobby. Bobby didn't have any hair on his head. Bobby didn't wear a helmet. He had a full head of hair. Now, keep in mind that Bobby, when he left the NHL, he didn't have much hair. He got to the WHA, he had a whole lot of hair. Well, I looked down and I realized that Bobby's hair was not on his head because it was in my hand. I pulled Bobby Hall's wig off.
Oh, yeah.
Scared the shit out of myself, threw it out to the center ice. I got 5 minutes for fighting, 2 minutes for roughing, I think it was, or elbowing, something like that. Bobby didn't get a penalty at all. So I sat in the box. Bobby went off the ice, came back out, had a Jaffa helmet on. Went on and probably scored a couple goals, but I had an opportunity to face off against him. And once I got back on the ice, and he said, hey, Bobby. I actually said, hey, Mr. Hall, I'm very sorry. I didn't mean that. He said, kid, don't worry about it. I need to get a new one anyhow. So the story doesn't end there. If you got some time, I mean, I don't know how much time we got, but the game's over with. Bill Friday, who was very colorful back then, like I said, the WHA really was kind of a rebel league, trying to be colored. He had, instead of the black and white striped referee jerseys on, it was red and white up and down. So very colorful, because Bill Friday was very colorful to begin with. So we're skating off the ice. I skate him. I says, Bill, I said, why only 7 minutes? He says, what do you mean? I says, well, pulling hair is a gross misconduct. How come you didn't give me a gross misconduct? And he says, because that's not real hair. You didn't pull this. You got to pull real hair. That wasn't real hair. I said, okay, that makes sense. So the story goes on. It's not over with. So Frank, I threw out the name Frank or Steve Durbano. So Steve Durbano was a crazy man, tough guy, but thank goodness he was my teammate. Great teammate, but thank goodness I didn't have to play against this guy. He gets thrown out of the game earlier in the game. So he's already, the game's still going on. He's already dressed. He's back by the locker room. So the game's over with. All the guys are in the shower. All of a sudden, Glenn Stommer comes in. He says, hey, guys, help. Durbel's getting beat up. He's getting mobbed. So we all go running out there, bare-ass naked, in the freezing cold of the bowels of the Winnipeg arena, and trying to rescue Durbel from a mob of people. They were running after him. So I often say to Frank Beaton, he says, that's the smallest I've ever seen you, Frank. Frank was a bit of a ladies' man. He says, oh, it was freaking cold. Everything shrinks in the cold. So they had to give us an escort out of there because the bus used to come down underneath. They had to escort us out of the arena. And the next day on front page of the Winnipeg paper, there's a picture of Bobby with his wig off, looking for his wig on the ice. And I got death threats from that point on.
Just like Jim Carr, pretty much.
Long story, but there you go.
Oh, great story. We love those stories.
It's tremendous.
Those are the stories that, as hockey fans, we miss with hockey now, and we yearn for more of that. But, of course, with social media, like you said, it would be a whole nother level of being canceled and all that other fun stuff. So let's move to the big topic. Let's move to how you got involved with the movie Slapshot, how it all came to be. Before we get into the movie, how did you become part of the cast?
Well, it was my first year pro, like for the Johnstown Jets, and we had you talk about tough teams. Again, it was a team that was, put together. It was put together by Glenn Sommer, but also by his father-in-law, Big Daddy Johnny Mitchell. So you had the three Carlson brothers, and they were the Hanson brothers in real life. They're from the Iron Range of Minnesota, all 6'3". Jeff and Jack weighed about 215. Steve was the baby. He was about 180 pounds, 70 pounds. Wore black rim glasses, had the long hair. And then you had a fellow on the team by the name of Dave Killer Hanson, and then we had a couple other tough guys. So we had a guy on the team by the name of Ned Dowd, very educated, went to Bowdoin University, Massachusetts, an Ivy school, leading scorer there. Was under contract with the St. Louis Blues, playing for us. Who had a sister by the name of Nancy Dowd, who was a screenplay writer out in Los Angeles. So Ned went on to, I think this might have been Ned's first year as well, went on one night in a drunken stupor. He's talking to his sister and is telling his sister about, you ought to see where the hell they stuck me. I'm in this friggin' town where, the mills are closing. We've got, they're trying to sell the team. We got these guys that wear black rim glasses. They play hockey with glasses. And there's this idiot called Killer Hanson. And he's rambling on and on about it. And like I said, he says, and they're trying to sell a team. And she says, well, who owns the team? He says, I don't know who owns the team. And she says, I don't believe that. So she ends up coming down and spending a couple of weeks with Ned. And ultimately, kind of like the fly on the wall. She's hanging around, in the bars afterwards and so forth and so on. And so I guess the light bulb went off and she went back to LA. So as the season goes on, we see Ned off at times kind of talking into his hand. And we finally call him and I said, what the hell are you doing, Ned? He says, I'm sending my sister tape recordings of the daily activities. So he was feeding her all the nonsense that was going on throughout the day and the characters and this and that. And so she literally wrote the script. She wrote the script, sold it to Universal Studios. They started, so this was the 74-75 season. Started, so during the summer of 75, they started casting actors to play the key roles of the movie. And then, of course, they got Paul Newman after the director actually dumped Al Pacino. Al Pacino, I think, was the first guy that was going to play Reggie Dunlop. And George Roy Hill found out that he couldn't skate and ixnayed him and then got Paul. But Nancy had convinced Universal Studios to have her brother come down to Los Angeles, and they would call a casting call on the ice. And he would go out there and he'd run all these actors on the ice on drills and they would watch and see who could skate well, et cetera, et cetera. So they had guys like, John Travolta, Nick Nolte, Peter Strauss, Donnie Most, on and on, these A-listed actors. And after a while, he just pretty much told Universal, none of these guys can skate. They're horrible skaters. In fact, I think Peter Strauss broke an ankle in doing a end-to-end skating drill. And so they were kind of, concerned because they really wanted to make sure that this movie showed real hockey, was real hockey action. The guys looked right. So I don't know if it was Ned or Nancy or who made a suggestion, but so they kind of said, well, why don't you go back and let the Carlsons be the Hansons, play the roles that you wrote about them as, and let Hanson play Killer Carlson, the role that he was, written about. And so they did. They came back, and it was now we're in the 75-76 hockey season. They came back sometime during the season. Jack got called up to Edmonton. He was playing for Edmonton, so he wasn't with us. And they sat me, Jeff, and Steve down, had us read a couple lines from the movie. I don't know who we were in front of, the casting director and probably the George Roy Hill, the director, and Nancy. And I think, first off, they were surprised to find that we actually could read. but but I don't think we acted very well. But anyhow, so they ultimately said, "Hey guys, you want to be in the movie?" And of course, yeah. Where do we sign? We didn't ask how much do we get paid. We didn't, and we signed the contract, and that was kind of, played the rest of the season, and actually started filming before the season was over with while we were in the playoffs, and that's how it started.
So the question I asked Yvonne too. Paul Newman, what good stories from Paul Newman? Great guy. He seemed to really like him.
Yeah. I tell people, and I say it in all sincerity, he's, all the people I've had the pleasure of meeting throughout my life, he's one of the best people ever. Just a good guy. I mean, put aside, his accomplishments in the movies, he was just a darn right good guy. Fit right in with us, acclimated right away. There was nothing showy, nothing flashy about him. He'd come walking in a t-shirt and, loafers and his iced coffee, and, went on set and talked to everybody. And we all became pretty good drinking buddies and pulled a lot of jokes on each other. And, and even after the movie was over with, I was able to maintain a friendship with him and do some things with him afterwards.
Play a coach, Reg Dunlop.
Yeah.
Dave, can you take that and expand it upon now you're in Johnstown, you're in the community, and just how much the community embraced you folks as you're filming, and what it brought to that town, especially at the time where, the mill was closing pretty much. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think the first off, a lot of the guys from the 74-75 season came back, which was a good thing because we had won. We won the Federal League. Actually, it was the North American Hockey League Championship that season, and had the big parade and everything you saw in the movie. I tell people there's more fact and fiction in that movie. So pretty much everything you see in that movie, with the exception of a strip tease, happened in Johnstown or happened somewhere in that league. So we're all back. So yeah, I think when the movie people moved in, I mean, they're all nice people, and they spent a lot of money. I think it was a really new and exciting thing for Johnstown, which, to your point, Derek, was that the mills were closing. It was a hardship town, hard working, blue collar people. First off, they loved that brand of hockey, when we won the championships and stuff. And yeah, they just embraced us. In fact, when we finally left, when the movie wrapped up, there was people standing on the side of the streets holding signs saying, "Thank you, we'll miss you," all that kind of stuff. So it was pretty cool.
Great.
Yeah,
that's great. Now, with that parade, did you guys get a private screening of Deep Throat and Meatball by any chance after the parade ended?
That's a good trivia question. That's one of those things we won't talk about.
There you go.
And good segue to your question.
Oh, I was just gonna say, is there a fun story on set that you had with Paul or with some of the other guys on the cast, and just a funny kind of a scene where you guys just couldn't keep it together when you were filming the scene that you had to do a bunch of takes on, just because you guys just couldn't stop laughing?
Well, that happened often, and it got to so that happened often, and something that we didn't know at the time was, so they would shoot the days, they would take all the film that they shot, they'd send it off to New York to develop it, and then they would express it back, and the next day, George Roy Hill, the director, D.D. Allen, the editor, and I think Newman and probably Nancy Dowd would get together at night at the end of the day or whatever it was, and then they would watch what was shot, the day before, 2 days before. And so we caught wind of that, we being Jeff, Jack, or Jeff, Steve, and myself, and a couple of the actors, and we caught wind of it. So we found out where they were, and we kind of snuck in, which later we found out was nobody got to do this kind of stuff. But we kind of snuck in and watched, and then they realized we were there, and they kind of left us in there, and we laughed, and we started seeing the funny outtakes that just. So we actually started setting things up, to have stupid stuff, and again, you talk about social media and stuff. But someone would be doing a scene, all of a sudden, next, you got someone walking through, wiggling their dick, going, all right, and that kind of stuff. But so, like I said earlier, Newman was a prankster. He was a jokester. He liked to pull stuff, and so he just fit right into our wheelhouse. So when Newman came into town, they had a hotel room for him downtown. At the hotel that we all stayed at. And when we had to do long overnight shots and stuff, but they also rented a house for him, the team doctor's house. They let him use it. It was up on Westmount, which was actually up out of the valley of Johnstown, up in the kind of the ritzy district. So when Newman came into town, Newman was a Coors drinker. So Coors beer didn't make it to this side of the Mississippi yet, right, to the eastern side of the country. And so he had 100 cases of Coors shipped in for himself. He also had a sauna built, a single-person sauna built just for him at the hotel by the pool. And so, like I said, when we had a late night or something, and he couldn't get up to his house, he would stay in the room at the hotel and get up first thing in the morning, go sweat out his beer that he drank the night before, and then get on set. So we're all in the bar one night drinking, and he takes off. And so Jeff, Steve, and I slipped back into the kitchen and found these big bags of popcorn that they put on, they put out the popcorn on the snacks in the bar, but they had these big bags of popcorn, a bunch of bags of popcorn. So we went out to a sauna, and we filled the sauna with popcorn, knowing that he's going to be jumping in the next morning. We thought it would be a great joke, right? Open the door, all the popcorn falls out, this and that. So the next day rolls around, we're on set, Newman comes in, and we're all waiting for him to say something, or, and we're kind of giddy, and doesn't say a word. Usual Newman goes on his daily business. And we're going, what the hell? So this goes on and on and on. So nothing ever happens. We're kind of wondering, geez, what the heck? So we're shooting a scene late at night in Ligonier, Pennsylvania. It's the bus scene. And where the Booster Club bus pulls in behind the team bus, and we all jump off, and we're exchanging each other's, the Booster Clubs are coming on our bus, we're this and that. So it's a long night. We're sitting, waiting. And one thing about movies, there's a lot of sitting around and waiting around. So we're up in Ligonier, small town, late at night, it's dark out. We start drinking beer in the bus. We're half in the bag. And then come up with a pretty good idea that, hey, wouldn't it be funny, Paul, what do you think? Wouldn't it be funny if when we stop and we run off the bus and they got the extras are like doctors' wives and lawyers' wives and people from the community and stuff. People they handpicked, all these extras. Wouldn't it be funny if we run out and we're bare ass naked? Wouldn't that be fun? And Luke was going, yeah, I think that's a great idea. I said, okay, let's do that. Next thing we know, we hear action. We hear on the radio action. So the bus is rolling on. We're stripping down. We're taking our clothes off. The bus stops. We go running out. Now the camera's set up over here. It's a shot so they see everybody. Camera's over there. We go run out. We're jumping up and down. We're giggling. We're laughing. And of course the Booster Club people are kind of like, what the heck? And we're thinking, right, late at night, there's only a couple people. It's going to be the cameraman, a couple people from the crew. That's all going to be there. And we stop and we turn and we look, and I swear to God, the entire town of Ligonier was there. Grandmas, grandpas, grandchildren, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews. And we're going, oh my gosh, And then we're looking around and saying, well, where the hell's Newman? How come Newman's hanging out the bus window going, payback's a bitch, boys. Payback's a bitch.
That's great.
Well, you got us.
So, Dave, you brought it up, and being an uber Slapshot nerd, is there scenes that were cut out of the movie that would have been should have been added like years later with the director's cut? Is there something that was left on the cutting room floor that big Slapshot hockey fans would be curious to know that they cut out of the movie?
Well, the only thing I can really remember, I mean, we shot a lot of stuff, but the one thing that I shot, didn't see any remnants of it, was they actually had Jeff at some point in time driving a bus with a German Nazi helmet on, singing "On the Wings of a Snow White Dove." And I don't know what the whole context of it was. I don't know if it's when we got out of jail onto the bus or what the heck the deal was. But yeah, we never saw that. You know, when we saw the premiere, I think that was the one thing that we said, well, what happened to that scene? Where's that one at? So other than that, I nothing really else comes to mind, but that's freaking 50 years ago. So,
well, speaking of 50 years ago, before I cut to these guys for more questions, when we were talking to Yvonne, we were hoping that they were going to do something epic for the 50th year anniversary. Do you guys have anything planned for that?
No, I don't. I know there's a lot of, we cross paths with a lot of people here and there across the country, and people always talk about it. And, there's some organizers that say this and say that. So, it's a wait and see. But no, to my knowledge, there's nothing formally been put together for that.
We're gonna have to get a petition around and get that Chief Booster Club back together again.
There we go. Yeah.
Derek, question for Dave.
Can you talk about the pre-game brawl at Peterborough? And I believe that was based on a real game in Syracuse, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, you are mistaken, but you got the right state. Yeah, it was. Okay. It was Buffalo.
Okay.
We were playing a Buffalo Norseman, and it was that championship year, that 74-75 season. So again, like I say, there's parts that movie's more fact and fiction, and this was part of it. So we were playing against the Buffalo Norsemen. They were playing out of Tonawanda, New York, right outside of Buffalo. And it was the first series, and they had a fella on the team by the name of Craig Neal, I think his name was. Very good hockey player, big tough guy, but he got blinded in junior hockey and wore a shield to protect himself. You wouldn't know it as a player. Like I said, good hockey player. In fact, he may have been drafted. I'm not sure, but highly scouted at one time. And so we were playing in Buffalo, and I'm trying to think here. I take that back. So we started off in New York, or started off in Johnstown, won the game, went to Buffalo. It was the best of 5, so it's best 3 out of 5. Went to Buffalo. So in Johnstown, for some reason, Craig got suspended, wasn't able to play the next game. But he's in the stands, and it was a small rink, small arena. I had a teammate on the team. It was an African-American, actually my roommate, outstanding hockey player by the name of Henry Taylor. But he was black. Like I said, he's a black player. So Craig was in the stands during the game, yelling disparaging remarks against Henry. After the game, we tried to go after him. Actually, the cops grabbed me and another fellow by the name of Vern Campagato, another teammate, and stuck us in the back of the doggone cop car with our equipment on to let things cool down and so forth and so on. So we were playing against them in the third game in Johnstown. Now, back then in warm-ups, the referees weren't on the ice, just the players. The players would go out and warm up. And just like similar to like in the movie where Steve clotheslines that guy sitting on ice and a big brawl breaks out, prior to guys breaking off into their own zones, everybody would skate the full length together. So both teams would be skating the full perimeter of the ice, and then we would break off. While that was going on, I went to go after Craig Neal, and my buddy Campagato got to him first. Now, Craig didn't wear a shield during warm-ups that he had to wear, and so we went after him, and it turned into a big brawl with no officials on the ice. And so everybody was fighting. That's the way it was then. And poor Craig, he was just getting pounded, and he tried to get off the ice. Well, the stands were full of people. The fans just threw him right back on the ice. So he ran down and up through the corridor with his skates on the concrete to get into the locker room. By the time the team, eventually everything settled down, we broke off. They went to the locker room. We went to our locker room, got ready to come out to the game. They refused to come out and play the game. The commissioner actually happened to be there that game. He went in and told them, you don't come out and play the game, you forfeit the game and you forfeit the series. And they said, no, we're not coming out and play this hockey game. You need to do something. He said, no, you forfeit. Wow. We won that series.
Wow.
And they had to get the police dogs and the police to escort them to their bus and escort the bus out of town because Johnstown fans were just – and the poor owners came to us afterwards and they chewed us out saying, we had to give money back to all those fans. We had a packed house. Don't you know what that does to us? And they're yelling, screaming at us. Who cares?
Too much, too soon.
Yeah.
Ed.
Sure, Dave. I'm going to go a little bit outside the movie here a little bit and kind of go back to your pro career way. And I'm going to go to one of my normal questions that I ask everybody. What was your favorite building when you were pro to play in?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I got to tell you, I played one of my most memorable places was Houston. I got called up to Minnesota against Houston, and I had Gordie Howe, Mark and Marty Howe. That was when Gordie came out of retirement to play with the Suns. And they had this big tough guy by the name of Cam Connor. Big Montreal draft pick, big tough guy, went on and had a great career. And what was cool was I ended up getting a fight with him. And I cut him over his eye. I'm in the penalty box. And it's the first time I ever saw myself on a Jumbotron and got to watch my fight back. And it looked pretty cool. And I think, wow, yeah, look at what I did. Fortunately, I never had to fight him again because I think I got a lucky punch in and I came out on top on that one. But anyhow, that was, there was a lot of great arenas. You go to Quebec, of course, if you go to Quebec and you have the famous hot dog up there, great atmosphere. You go into Edmonton. I don't know that I had I guess I don't know that I really had a favorite. I think it was just a blast everywhere we went.
Great. Dave, question is, out of all these years of being representative of the Hanson Brothers and Slapshot, what is your funniest or wildest fan interaction story?
Probably when Jeff got hit in the face with a tire iron or keys of the camper.
Tire iron.
Yeah, to be able to go up in the stands in Utica, New York, and start pounding the fans. It's pretty special there.
Now, was that based on the Bruins Rangers brawl, or was that based on something that you had seen?
We were in Utica, New York, playing against the Mohawk Valley Comets. Jeff scored a goal, skated around, and this guy threw a cup of ice and hit Jeff in the face. We all literally went up over the stands, up over the glass, into the stands, fighting. Ended up went back to our locker rooms, and just like the movie, the police knocked on the door, didn't even allow us to get our equipment off, and hauled us off to jail, and we had to get the bail money together through our collection of our mail money and get out of jail.
And it was just a cup of ice, confirmed, right?
Yeah, it was a cup of ice. Yeah, it wasn't a tire chain or a monkey wrench.
Did
Speaking of that, one of the things surprised me that did not get in the film is, of all places, in Utica. You talk about favorite places, or at least come up with some favorite stories. We were playing a game there, and someone somehow snuck in a chicken and threw a live chicken out on the ice. And talk about hilarious, trying to watch first the referees, and then after that the maintenance people that try to catch this chicken on ice scrambling around. That was hysterical.
Derek, you're up.
So I wanted to tell you that the story with me is 1983. we get a VCR for Christmas, and my dad immediately goes to the local, I believe it was a supermarket. I don't even think we had video stores back then, Dave. And he rents Slapshot. And, the rest is history, if you will. I was only 10. But I read about your son, Christian. Do you know the first time and what age he was when he saw the movie?
Yeah, and I didn't find this out till years later after he saw the movie. But yeah, I think if I recall, he might have been around 12, 13 or something like that,
Yeah.
And I was coaching them, but I wasn't on this trip when the parents popped the movie in and he got to watch it. And
oh, that's great.
like, oh my God, is that my dad?
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Ed.
Well, I'm going to ask you. It's kind of a weird way to ask the question, but what's it like to go into an NHL locker room and have all these guys look at you and just start quoting the movie?
It's really wild, and I'll tell you. I'll give you an example that it just humbles me and blows my mind. I mean, so years later, after the movie, and we're retired, and the next thing you know, we're through kind of a series of odd events. We are now traveling the country as the Hanson Brothers, making appearances, and so we're under contract with Budweiser. Promoting their Bud Ice product, and they got us going into every NHL city there is, as well as every other. It seemed like every minor league city, and et cetera, et cetera. So we're in Madison Square Garden, and we do our Zamboni skiing in Madison Square Garden, where we're getting pulled behind the Zamboni on ski ropes and doing a little bit of routine. And then after that, we go up into the blue section. We're meeting fans. The next thing we know, we're being asked to go into the locker room because Adams, Graves, Kovalev, Messier, and Gretzky, they all want to see us and meet us.
Oh,
now, Steve knew Gretzky because he played with him, and I played against, actually Messier started out his pro career in the WHA, played against him. But my point being, we're being asked and being greeted by NHL stars to meet us. I mean, I'll tell you another quick story. We're in St. Louis, and same thing. We got to make an appearance. We got to go in the stands. We got to do, just do our Hanson Brothers shtick. And then warm-ups, we get tracked down by the St. Louis Blues trainer or equipment manager saying, "Hey, would you guys be willing to take a few minutes and come back into our break room?" I go, "What? Yeah, for why?" He says, "Well, there's a couple guys that want to meet you." So we go back in. Now, keep in mind, this is during warm-ups. Chris Pronger and Al McGinnis get off the ice during warm-ups because they want to come in and get pictures taken with us.
That's awesome.
So that's common. That was common. I mean, and not only with NHL players, but movie stars. People. We're in the balls of St. Louis. The same time that this goes on, and we're walking through the bottom portion to get into an elevator to go up somewhere. And all of a sudden, we hear this big echoing bellow down the hallway saying, "I can't believe it! It's the fucking Hanson Brothers!" And we turn and we see this big guy running. And we're going to the person that's taking it around. Says, push the button! Come on, let's get out of here. And he's going, hold on, running. We're going, push the button. The guy comes running, and it's John Goodman.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he's hugging us. I can't believe it, the fucking Hanson Brothers.
Oh, great.
He said, "I want a picture." So that it's been a ride. It's been a riot, and it's like I said, we want to meet these guys. We're impressed by them, and then to turn around and have them, be the ones that are impressed me with us. It's just kind of mind blowing at times.
But you guys are folk heroes, no question about it.
Well, and criminals, most others criminals.
Yes, sir. Dave, looking back at the era of the NHL now, how do you think that it's changed with the loss of the enforcer, and your thoughts on the decline of that side of hockey? What's your thoughts?
Well, it's only natural. It had its place at the time. it was an exciting part. You talked to a lot of old timers, and what do they say? There's two times when the fans stand up and cheer. One's when a goal score, the other's when a fight breaks out. And it was an effective tool put into a game plan. Teams were built around tough guys, but they had their place. They had their place, to protect their stars on the team or the smaller guys or from people getting abused. And they had their place to intimidate. And it worked. And it was an exciting, fun time of hockey. But now, where the game has gone, where it's you can call it is a major sport. It's throughout the world. They did have to clean it up a bit. But I do think that for the most part, there could still be a place for that enforcer that can still play the game. I mean, you look at guys like Bobby Probert, even Dave Schultz scored 20 goals one year in the National Hockey League. I mean, those guys could play. They kind of got pigeonholed at times, but those guys like that could play. And so you could have a place for those on the teams nowadays. It's just a shame that they don't. I think it misses a game, but it's still a great game. I mean, the athletes are exceptional athletes now. But I kind of miss, you don't see the Mario Lemieux out there that can go, or even Wayne Gretzky go, that stand off by being able to carry the puck one end to the other at times. Unless you have the educated eye and you can really watch a McDavid or a McKinnon or a Crosby and see the talent that they have. But the game is so fast now, and it's so tight, and there's so little room out there that those nuances and those performances are missed nowadays. And I think even the checking part of the game is it's not as physical as it used to be. Playoffs cranks up, and it's a fun time. I enjoy watching playoff hockey, but I also think the seasons are a little bit too long. It is tough on the body nowadays to travel. And the guys can't play at that intensity level for 84 games a season. So I think, it's got its good things. It's got its bad things. I do wish there's still some of the old time hockey still left in the game. And it comes out every once in a while, but certainly not as much as I would like to see it.
Amen.
Derek, you're up.
I wanted to ask you, over the years, who was the toughest opponent that you dropped the gloves with?
Oh boy, there were some good ones. Terry O'Reilly, like I mentioned, is Cam Connors. There's a fella, and actually we're good friends. We've coached together, and our kids have grown up together. I hated playing against him because I knew I was going to have to fight him if he didn't chop my arms off before I got to him. There was a fellow by the name of Kim Claxton. Real tough bugger. I mean, there was some tough guys. So Jules Bilodeau, I fought him a couple times in the minors. He was like a linebacker on skates. He had the size of Andre the Giant. So there was, one time there was a fellow I got in a fight with that I can honestly say I lost that one by the name of Dave Richter. He was about 6'5". Played for Philadelphia, Andy. You might remember him.
I do.
He caught me with an uppercut, broke my nose. Never had a chance to go back after him because we kind of separated or went in different directions afterwards. But I don't know. That's kind of it, I guess. I mean, they all were tough. I only fought the tough guys.
Of course.
Of course, yes.
Eddie, question for Dave.
Sure. I'm going to say, what's your favorite professional hockey moment that you have that, whether it be, your favorite goal, great hit, great fight, just something that, you would say that it was like, that was just really a great moment for myself when you were playing.
Oh, I mean, I only scored one goal in the National Hockey League, and I can, I'd like to tell you, I came down and deked three guys and looked left and shot right and put it over Rogie Vachon's shoulder, but it was more like had my eyes closed and scrambled and shot the puck and went through people, and he didn't see it and I didn't see it till the red light went off. There's I think that as far as highlights go, I hate to put it this way, but I mean, I overachieved just by the short time that I played in National Hockey League, the short time I played in the WHA, and I had a 10-year pro career, played against a lot of people, with a lot of people. And I look back, and the thrills for me were playing against and with guys like Gordie Howe, Bobby Hall, Frank Mahovich. I mean, Frank Mahovich was a teammate of mine, good guy, friend. Paul Henderson, played in the Forum against Bobby Clark and the tough guys. Played with and against Davey Keon. I mean, just great, iconic Hall of Fame hockey players. Rod Langway, played with Rod Langway.
Oh, wow.
So that's the kind of stuff if I really reflect about my hockey career, what's the best part about it? That's it. Didn't play again. I played against Bobby Orr. I mean, my gosh, and got to become and know Bobby Orr. And the funny story about Bobby Orr, at least it's funny to me. I look back, it wasn't funny at the time, but Bobby's actually playing with Chicago. It turned out to be his last game as a professional hockey player. We're playing in the old Olympia Arena. I'm with the Detroit Red Wings. I find myself with the puck coming down on the wing, and I look up, and it's against Bobby Orr.
Wow.
And I go through my mind is, oh my gosh, it's Bobby Orr. What am I going to do now? Well, what I did was I panicked. I dropped the puck behind, thinking I'm going to do a drop pass to my teammate, and ironically, it goes to a Blackhawk. They go down the other end and they score. So, that was my one and only shift against Bobby Orr.
Well, Dave, I think I was talking to Andy before he went on. You could argue the 5 most famous hockey players in the world are Wayne Gretzky, Robert Gordon Orr, and the Hanson brothers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and I got to play with them all. Or against them. Yeah.
Yep.
Dave, I got to ask you, as we start winding down, I don't know if we lost you with your camera because we can't see you on the screen, but my question is, when you look back at the hockey career, between the Slapshot fame and the movie career,
What happened?
I don't know. What's your most proudest moment between your professional hockey career that a lot of people probably don't know about, that we'll be bringing that to light, and your Slapshot fame? What's your biggest, proudest moment to share?
Well, I don't know if I have, Andy, if I have a proudest moment in hockey. I mean, I had a lot of great things. Like I said, I think I've overachieved. I mean, gosh, like I said, I was a big fish in a very small pond. I didn't skate at an indoor rink till I was a junior in high school. All our practices were outdoors. We had to build our own rinks, play our games outdoors. But, to go from that and to, end up winning a junior national championship when I played junior hockey, to go on to win 3 professional championships, and on those teams be either a captain or an alternate captain. That's more than I would ever thought that would happen to me, and have a 10-year career, professional career, and made a living at it for a while, and ended up meeting a wonderful lady that became my wife and had children and stuff. And then with Slapshot, it really, like I said, through a kind of a fluke, a series of events, turned into an opportunity for Jeff, Steve, and myself to travel the world and bring a lot of fun and joy to people, but also to really help a lot of charitable and needy causes. We've helped raise millions of dollars, for things as small as to save a rink up in a small farming town in Saskatchewan, to help and raise $500,000 for the fire victims in Southern California. Those kind of things. In that type of range. So we've been a part of some pretty cool stuff that helped a lot of people, over the years. And so, you want to get a little serious about it. I mean, that's pretty cool. Something that, yeah, I could say I'm pretty proud of.
Ed, well, final question for Dave before we let him go.
Sure, Dave. Do you have a book, or do you have any card signings coming up? Do you have any charity events that you got coming up, like that you can promote with us, and or that we can put a link in the interview, or anything like that we can help you out promoting?
Well, I think my books. I think all three of my books are probably. My mom bought one, and the other two I donated to the library for coloring books, so I don't have to worry about my book anymore. No, I don't think I don't have anything. The one thing I do is that it seems we don't travel as much anymore as we used to. Probably because we're getting older and we just, just don't travel as much like we used to. But I have a lot of fun with this cameo.com thing. So, it's funny. I get some of the oddest requests to, hey, my buddy just got divorced. Can you send him a congratulation video to, hey, can you put a smile on my buddy's face? He's going through a tough time with cancer or something like that, or birthday parties, and et cetera, parties and things like that. So a lot of corny stuff. So that cameo.com, if you want to plug that a little bit, have people look me up on that. I have a lot of fun with that. It kind of turns out to be a good thing for people once in a while, but that's about it.
Derek, final question for Dave before we
not so much a question, but just it was an absolute honor, sir. I hope we kept our questions, as Jim Carr would say, within the boundaries of good taste. But it was an absolute honor. The Hanson Brothers are eternal, sir. I hate when people call it a cult classic. Slapshot is the greatest sports movie ever. The Hanson Brothers are eternal, and I just wanted to say thank you. Also, after filming this, Ed has a fashion show to go to, and I actually put a bounty out on Andy's head. So we got a few things going on over here. So thank you very much, sir.
I hope he wiggles at him and everybody except his wife runs out of the place.
There you go.
Dave, I always wrap it up with I want to ask you if you could sum up your career, including Slapshot, in one word, what would it be?
Unbelievable.
I think it was our honor to be impressed by having you on and talking as kids growing up, fans. I got to meet you last week. I couldn't say enough good things. You had a moment with my son that he was probably my age the first time he saw Slapshot. You guys were fantastic. I can't touch on that enough without getting a little misty, as they say. But it's just a uber fan thing to have you on and chirp with the boys. And hopefully, I always say this at the end too, friend of the show, Dave Hanson, after having you on, and just couldn't thank you enough.
Well, I appreciate you having me. I've enjoyed it. Really enjoyed meeting you guys. I was just going to say, if you happen to talk to Coach anytime in the near future, tell him to tell you the story about the time he burned his ass on the sauna heater.
Steve Coates is on the list. Definitely, I'd love to get him on. So, Dave,
you're gonna need more than an hour with that guy.
We try to keep it around an hour. We would have you on forever as long as we could.
Yes.
But then next time we have you on, we're gonna have you on with Yvonne. We'll try to coordinate something that you guys can chirp back and forth.
Good. Yeah. All right, guys.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
It's really an honor.
All right,
an honor. Thank you.
All right, boys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.